Welcome to the Forge Truth Podcast, where we are building great men as God defines greatness. Forge is a movement of men with a mission to help all men realize they are the deeply beloved, redeemed sons of the Most High God. I'm your producer, Zach, and I'm here to discuss the issues that affect men the most with our two hosts, Dr. Pete Allinson, lifelong pastor and leader of Forge, and Jason Quinones, Bishop of Core Faith Church in Oviedo, Florida. Men, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here. Good to see you guys. We got a lot going on today, huh?
Yes, it's a good day. It's a good day to be recording.
Amen.
Absolutely. Nice to be back at Site C and back around the table again. We have a guest in the studio today.
Yeah.
It is a returning guest. Pete, why don't you introduce him?
Yeah, it's good to have Anthony Rivera with us again. Anthony and Bishop share the same hairstyle, and so we're glad you're with us, Anthony. Anthony is a former Navy SEAL for many, many years, and it's good to have you back. He's been on our podcast. So this is returning.
It's the third time.
Third time. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Is that right?
I think so.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm. Is that our cap?
Yeah,
that's our cap.
This is my final one.
Yeah, no, this is it. That's it. No, but you got a lot to say, and it's going to be an interesting topic as we talk about self-defense and hear some of your story and some of your thinking on that a little bit more. So that's great. In fact, at Forge today, we talked about becoming a man of self-control, the in-control man. And it really pertains to what we're talking about today. Because a lot of guys do carry guns. And we need to talk about that. And how do Christian men even think about self-defense and all that?
Yeah.
So here we go.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Thanks, gents, for being so welcoming.
Yeah.
For the third time.
For the third time.
Yeah.
No.
Third and final.
No. That won't be the final time. But I guess we ought to start with some of your thinking along the whole lines of self-defense. Lay that foundation out for us, and then we want to talk about what you experienced personally.
Sure. Yeah. I've spent a majority of my adult life trying to be a capable man, both physically and then from a defense standpoint, and then emotionally, especially with my wife, be in control emotionally with my own emotions. And then with my kids, spiritually, right? Like, how do I make sure that I'm as best a spiritual example and capable spiritually to guide these kids through their spiritual journey? And I was talking this morning at the Forge table, and I was talking about how, like, I'm not a very smart man, right? So, like, I mess up all the time. I'm a very flawed man. So when I think about, like, physical protection, emotional protection, spiritual protection, and then all the different categories of protection, naturally, I always gravitate more towards physical protection because I think that I've done my job. Right? And then I let the other ones kind of falter or not become a focus. But now as I continue on through my faith journey, I realize that, yes, be physically capable and be emotionally and spiritually protective of myself, of my wife especially, and then of my kids until I can no longer do that.
Well, that's good, isn't it? Both and, right? Yeah. I think, don't you think we as men tend to be toward that physical protector side?
Yeah, I mean, well, when you think about it, most of the situations you're going to deal with are physical. You know, if it's protecting your family from a bad guy or a bad situation, you know, kind of thinking through whatever financial things that you're thinking about, whatever could be catastrophic for your family, you're thinking physically, generally. So kind of being ready in that sense. But I think that what you describe right now, even as a pastor, it's easy to just think, okay, well, I'm ready to preach a sermon, but am I emotionally capable? Am I emotionally prepared? Am I spiritually protected and prepared in battle? So I think that that's an important concept, and I think most guys probably would deal with the same thing.
Yeah, and it's just a natural way to think of yourself as a single lane protector because, like you said, most of the threats that we perceive in this plane of existence are really just how do I protect myself physically and how to protect my loved ones physically. But we don't think, anyway, I don't think naturally, how do I protect them emotionally? How do I protect them spiritually? How do I protect them emotionally? So going back to the physical part of it, I've been a lifelong athlete. In high school, I was on the wrestling team. I did wrestling practice just to keep my weight down. So that way during weightlifting season, I could perform in weightlifting season. And I did weightlifting for 3 years in high school. And then I did the swim team also. I love to be athletic.
Yeah, and moving all the time.
Moving, yeah. So like God gave us bodies and we got to move them as best we can.
Motion is lotion,
That's
baby.
right,
You know,
man, yeah. And as a result of that, that ended up shifting me into that protective mindset. And then I ended up joining the military after college, where in the military I became a SEAL. So now I wanted to become more heavily invested in that protection mindset. How do I protect those that can't protect themselves here in the United States against threats abroad? Again, just deepening my identity in this physical protection mindset. I did that for about 11 and a half years, deployed multiple times to nothing but combat zones. And then I was graced during my military career with a beautiful bride. Her name is Geneva. I can't thank her enough for being the woman for me and being the woman that God paired me with. She has made me and continues to make me every day, every bit of the man that God intends me to be. And that journey is not easy.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, because that's the hardest one. It's like, if it was up to me, I'd probably be a terrible person. Not intentionally. It's just that she sees that within me, that capability, and she also sees that potential in me. And every time I don't live up to that potential, it's really good to have those honest conversations and have that comfort in your relationship where your spouse can be like, hey, you're not being everything you're supposed to be. Step your game up, right?
When you marry right.
Yeah.
You know, you marry in the Lord. We need Christian women to be our wives.
Yeah.
Zach, for sure. All generations, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're who you pick as your wife will sharpen you no matter what. It's just how they sharpen you that matters.
Yeah.
You know.
That's true. And sometimes we need to help our wives understand our ego and how they can best communicate to us and get through to us.
Yeah.
Honey, yes, I need to grow. Yes, I need you to be honest with me. But sometimes my ego gets
Out of control.
Yeah. And sometimes you hurt me unnecessarily. So understand that I am sensitive to you and I'm vulnerable to you. I make myself more vulnerable to you than anybody else.
Yeah.
So we, in a sense, have to talk with our wives about having them help us take their straightforward comments.
Yeah, and then also from my lifelong pursuit of being capable, right?
Yeah.
I've also unintentionally become more aggravated at times because I always want to fight, even though there's no one to fight and nothing to fight. So case in point, earlier in our marriage, even up until like 4 years ago, whenever my wife would bring something up to me, immediately the defenses would go up, and now it's on counterattack time.
Yep.
Where she was genuinely just sharing something like, I see something better in you. Be the person that God intends you to be. Where I can't hear that, all I hear is ding, ding, ding,
Right.
fight time, right?
Yep.
So now when we're talking about this morning, don't be pugnacious, right? No pugnacious. So like, how do you, I can only speak from my personal journey. About 4 years ago, COVID happened and then we're locked together. A lot of changes happened. And I realized that like, she's not the person to fight against. She's the person to fight with as we're attacking whatever we've got going on in our lives. So I didn't realize it. Unfortunately, it wasted, not necessarily wasted. It wasted so many years of our marriage.
Well, we hear at our weddings and every wedding ceremony that we are one flesh.
Yeah.
And then we get married and we fight against the person who is my flesh.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to get that too. Hey, she's really not my enemy.
Right.
She's actually part of me.
Mm-hmm.
But that takes a long time for Christian men, I think, sometimes to let that sink in.
Yeah, and especially so like the first 5 years of my wife and I's marriage, I told you guys like I was around her minimally. I mean, maybe.
But you were deployed.
Just gone all the time.
Thank you for your service, by the
deployed.
way.
It was a pleasure and an honor. But I think because of that delayed onset of our marriage, I was a part-time husband at best. And when I came home, that's when, we started butting heads more and more and more. And then eventually I started realizing again, she's not somebody to fight with. She's somebody to fight. I'm sorry, she's not somebody to fight against. She's somebody to fight with as we tackle whatever issues. So I transitioned from that into fatherhood, and then that turns that protection on even more, right? Like, I want to protect my wife all day, every day. It's a choice that I have to make every day to love and protect my wife. Some days are easier than others, but you still have to make that choice. I can't make that choice with my kids.
Right.
My kids, they are there for me to protect. Again, just leaning more into that father role to protect them physically, spiritually, emotionally, and in all aspects. But and then when my daughter was born 15 years ago, I started training jiu-jitsu, and I did that silly enough. Like, I was like, all right, I'm dangerous with a gun. I'm dangerous, from afar, and then within a relatively close range. What if somebody puts their hands on me? How do I protect this little baby? How do I make sure that I can protect myself so that way I can protect my baby? So then started doing jiu-jitsu about 15 years ago, and then I had this silly little thought. I was like, I want whatever man ends up taking my role as a protector of my daughter to be able to have to fight me. And not that they have to win, but they have to actually show that they can fight.
Ooh.
Right? And I want my daughter not necessarily to see that, but to see that this man who's taking my protective role from you is now capable enough to do that. So you can feel comfortable with that.
I love it.
I hope it happens, but it's probably not realistic. Because, hopefully that I got a 15-year-old daughter right
Would
now.
you want to go after Anthony? Would you try to take him down?
Well, I mean, if marrying my wife depended on it, then yeah, I would.
There we go. Hey, I love it, right? It's like, you know what? You don't have to beat me, but you need to come and, we're going to grapple, man. We're going to see
engage.
Because, I remember a kid, there's only been one, he's still alive, but he came and asked me about Alexis and, them dating. And I remember one of the things that the most important thing for me that I told him, and this may seem extreme, and I thought about it because when I did communicate with his parents what I said to him, I said, let me tell you something. I said, I'm going to tell you one thing. If you take my daughter out anywhere, I said, first of all, you're not going anywhere alone with her. There always needs to be somebody because there needs to be accountability because I don't want you to make a dumb mistake. And I said, but I want you to understand that if anything goes down in a restaurant or a movie theater and you come home and tell me about it and my daughter doesn't come home, I'm going to have problems with that because I would die for my daughter.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that I'm entrusting her to you. And so what you're saying, you're like, this is unrealistic, but I think, man, guys, with your daughters and sons, you need to be preparing your sons this way, right? As well.
Yeah.
I think that's part of teaching our young men to be prepared. But man, I don't think that that's unrealistic. I think that's great. I'm going to start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now.
There we go.
But don't let Elle and them hear that because then they're going to hold me to it. But I'm going to go and start because I got to get ready.
I think every man really ought to learn how to handle themselves physically. I really do. And I wish I'd started doing that when I was younger in martial arts. It was not a big deal when I was young. Sports was, and so I became a runner and all that kind of stuff. But never really learned how to handle myself physically in personal combat. And it didn't even really hit me until 9/11 when that happened. And I was talking to one of the guys in our church who is black belt in Aikido. And I said, if you had been on that plane, what would have happened? He said, those guys would have been dead. They would never have been able to take that plane down because he could handle himself in close quarters. And I think generally speaking, we need to, and the biblical model of if somebody strikes you, turn the other cheek is biblical. Jesus was absolutely right. When we're defending the faith, we're not getting into physical contact. We need to be willing to be taken advantage of for the name of Christ. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about defending the weak and helpless. And so let's segue because, a lot of Christian men today are seeking to do that through jiu-jitsu or martial arts of some sort, or learning how to carry a gun and handle themselves with a gun. But you, of course, are dangerous now, both ways, physically and with a gun. And you carry, which you should, and many men carry. But you came into a situation recently Tell us about that, because we can really learn from this.
Yeah. So all that background build up to say, be capable in every way you can.
Yeah.
Physically, work out, move your body, be confident that you can protect yourself. And Jordan Peterson, in my opinion, says it best. He says, be an absolute monster, then learn how to tame it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a huge mindset to have. So a couple of months back, my daughter was 14 years old. She's now 15. She just turned 15 2 months ago. And I just picked her up from a friend of hers house, and it was about 8:30 at night. Sun was down. So I went to go pick her up, and I love those, one-on-one opportunities we as dads get in the cars. We get to speak to our kids, have them open up to us, tell us what's going on with us. So my daughter and I were having a good time in that maybe short 10-minute drive from her friend's house to my house. And we were laughing, listening to music, having a good time. So the energy was very uplifting, right? So I turn down my street, and I get about 2 houses away from my house. And as I get to that point of distance, there's a guy in front of the car walking his dog. And he's in his, I'd say late 50s, early 60s. Didn't seem too, threatening or anything like that. But he was waving me down with his hands. And he was walking his, like I said, his large poodle, waving me down with his hands. So I was like, I wonder if everything was okay. I pulled up to him, and on my daughter's side of the car, lowered the window, and he very aggressively said, "What the hell is going on with you?" I was like, "Whoa, what's wrong?" He's like, "Your brights are on." Very, very aggressive. And I was like, "They are?" Again, the tone was different that I was presenting to him, because he genuinely didn't pose a threat to me, and many people don't. I'm not saying that condescendingly.
No.
It's just I
Yeah.
am capable. I'm confident. I know that I'm going to be able to protect myself and my daughter.
Right.
So in that instance, I'm just getting all this negative energy from this guy. He's just very angry. And he starts kind of raising his voice more, to, talking down to me. "You had your brights on." I was like, "I'm sorry." I looked at the lights, and he was right. My brights were on, but I have a truck that the auto brights come on if you have that feature turned on. So I had to actively turn off. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even realize that the brights were on." I turned them off. He's like, "Yeah, but they were on." I was like, "Okay, is everything okay?" And again, I was seeking to see if I could help him out with anything. Genuine concern from one man to another. I was like, is your day okay? Is everything okay with you? And then he's like, "Oh, you're a funny guy, huh?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then he called me a mucking maggot, right? But then just changed the M out for F's, and that's what you got there. And I was
in front of your daughter?
In front of my daughter. She's literally sitting right next to this guy who's yelling at me through her. And I looked at my daughter, and I saw that nervous energy that she got. She looked at me, and I was like, "Oh!" I wanted to kind of de-escalate it by laughing.
Yeah.
And I slowly pulled away, and he right as he said that, he walked off. Right, continued to walk his dog. I got this uneasy feeling in me that man, something's wrong with this guy. He doesn't realize. Also, a little context of the man, he had a New York accent.
And
right?
he's your neighbor.
And he's my neighbor. He lives right around the corner from me, 4 houses over. So I pulled into the driveway, backed in, brought my daughter inside, and immediately I was like, "Man, I gotta go talk to this guy." So I got back in the truck, and I did a loop around my block, because I didn't know exactly where he lived, but I kind of knew, generally speaking, where he lived. So I was driving, and again, it's at night. I pulled my gun out just in case anything was happening, if he was carrying or something like that. No intention of harming him, but if he started getting crazy, I was going to be able to capably deal with that threat. He didn't see me pull the gun. I pulled it out of my holster where it's locked away in my truck, pulled it out, and then put it on the left side of me as I'm driving. Nobody could see it, posed no threat to anybody. I saw him. He had gone into his house, and he was peeking through the window of his front door, and kind of peeking around the corner, looking down at me. He was elevated in land, so I was like, "Oh, there's another threat." He's got the higher ground. He's in his house. He's in a defensible position, but I'm in my truck. I'm in a defensible position too, and I can quickly figure out where do I have to go. So that's where my mind is going the minute I see him peeking out of his window. And then he comes out of the door, opens the door, and he's like, "I called the cops." I was like, "Why?" He's like, I called the cops because your brights were on. Your brights were on. Again, very angry. I'm presenting nothing but calmness with him. I was like, you called the cops because my brights were on? And he says, yeah, your brights were on. I was like, I can't wait for them to get here because they're going to be blown away by this. This does not make any sense. Is everything okay with you? Again, I was trying to express concern to him. So again, he just could not de-escalate. He just kept getting angrier and angrier and angrier. But I wasn't feeding that energy at all. And I just told him, like, is everything okay? Like, is there anything that you want to talk about from one man to another? Because I just want to let you know, my daughter's 14 and you just, berated me in front of my 14-year-old daughter. Do you feel good about that? And he just, again, he could not turn that volume down. So I realized that he has no gun. He has no threat to me. He doesn't want to talk to me. So I just had this feeling in me. I was like, man, I got to pray for this guy. So I told him, if there's anything you want for me to pray for you about, please let me know. But I'm going to be praying that you have a better day tomorrow. Everything's going to be okay. And then I just drove away.
Wow.
Right? The minute I told him I was going to pray for him, you could see the steam valve just release in him. And he just completely lost all his negative energy. And he walked back inside. Now, I went home and my daughter had told my wife what I had done. She just knew that I had taken off. And I was like, all right, what's going on? She was like, what did you do? I was like, I just went to go talk to the neighbor who, called me what he called me to in front of Mia. She's like, you could have been her. I was like, relax. I'm a pretty capable guy. Everything's okay. I've trained my entire adult life to be competent and capable and especially defensive. So there was no threat. Like, everything's okay. But she had a good point. Like, from her perspective, all she knew was that maybe I was going to go hurt this guy. But she didn't know that my intention was to just ask him, is everything okay? I'm here to pray, right? Once I told her that, she kind of calmed down a little bit, but she still doesn't think it's a good idea. Anyway, yeah. So yeah,
Wow.
that's kind of what happened. Yeah.
Wow, there's a lot there. What are some of your reactions to this story? Should he even have, pursued that guy? Should he have just let bygones be bygones and just go inside? And what do you think?
I mean, I think because of the fact that it was a neighbor, I think that I could see the justification in that.
Yeah.
Because if he's a neighbor, you're probably going to see him again. And I think you want to be sure that you understand where this person's coming from. I mean, you can already kind of see that they're unhinged because of the way that he was speaking in front of his daughter and things like that. I mean, that's a little over the top. So I would say I can understand that. But I will also say Anthony's a much better guy than me, because the whole time when he was telling me that story earlier, I was like, I was repenting because I put myself in that situation, and I would have not went back to see him to de-escalate. I would have went back to see him and be like, bro, what on earth? Yeah, it wouldn't have been the same conversation. I just wouldn't have gone back because it would have been bad. So
you probably wouldn't have gone back because you might have.
Yeah, I would have been upset.
You were not in a prayerful mood.
No, I wasn't very spiritual.
What about you, Zach? What would you have done?
What stood out to me was that your confidence in the situation gave you more options.
Yes.
So the fact that you
I
were
like
not
that. Well put.
afraid meant that you didn't just have to decide, okay, I'm going to go home and I can't deal with this because I don't know the threat level. Your confidence and lack of fear meant that you had the option to go and, like, maybe I can pray for him. Maybe I can find out more. Whereas if someone was only afraid, that option kind of isn't available to them. So that stood out to me.
Wow, option. I wrote that down. Your confidence gave you more options.
Yeah. That's
I think that's extremely
You're so
insightful.
wise.
I know he is, for just being a really young guy. I mean,
Very wise.
yeah, I know. No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a great statement, and it did. And so I guess I would have probably been more like Bishop. I would have been ticked, particularly if it was a neighbor. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a pastor in a neighborhood. Thinking that way, I probably would not have escalated it. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't have either, Bishop. You would have wanted to, but you're a pastor too.
But I just wouldn't have gone back. I
You wouldn't have gone
back
back
out there. I would have, when he would have walked away, I could have seen myself with the whole, laughing at it. Like, what is wrong with this dude? And I would have just left it there. I wouldn't have wanted to go back and see how he was doing.
Now, the interesting thing is that you did go back because you wanted to see if he was obviously paranoid. He was looking out the window. He knew he crossed a line.
You could tell obviously that he was having a bad day.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I just wanted to let him know that one man to another, I've been there. I know what it's like to have a bad day. Please just know that everything's going to be okay. That was genuinely what I went out there to do.
I really admire that. I don't think that would have been my first response.
But see, and I think too, like I'm thinking, and tell me, I mean, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you've probably with, dealing with soldiers with PTSD and things like that, you've probably seen guys that seem unhinged.
Yeah.
And you just kind of like, it's different. Like your response is different because it's like, man, that guy doesn't want to hurt anybody. He's hurting.
Yes.
And I think, and
he's
so I think that
asking
we
for
can
help without asking for help.
It's kind of like a dog that's hurt, and you go to like do something to them, and they growl at you or they bark or they nip at you, and they don't want to hurt you. They're just hurting.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a good thing for us as men because, man, you could really impact someone's life just by engaging in a way like, you know what, you're not a threat. Like this is not really something. We're not going to go fisticuffs over this. You don't have a gun, drawn on me or anything. You're just a hurting guy. So I think that I applaud you 100% because I think that's much more pastoral than I would have been in that situation. But your experience lends to that, where most of us on this level, we see somebody acting like that. Like, what the heck is wrong with them? Like, why are they? That's ridiculous. That doesn't make sense. But dealing with people with trauma in situations like that kind of helps to see that.
Yeah, and then also another aspect of why I wanted to go back there to talk to him was that New York accent, and I'd never really seen him around much. I just wanted to let him know that, like, you're in Florida. We have stand your ground laws. So, like, if you present a threat to somebody legally, I can protect myself. Now, there has to be a justifiable threat, and that extends to your vehicle legally. So I was within my legal right to have my gun in my truck. I was within my legal right to pull that gun out as he is in his house in a defensible position. I did not use it. He did not see the threat there. However, I had to know all of those things and be cool, calm, and level-headed enough to be able to make those rational decisions. Again, I wanted to go there just to let him know that you can't talk that way down here. Like, you don't know the crazy that's out there. Really, please, God, just be careful. Don't be the way you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Piggybacking off of what Jason said, I think part of being Christ-like is not being distracted by the surface level of things, the surface appearance, because Jesus had a unique ability to look through the surface level and see where someone was really at or what was really going on with them. I think of like the woman at the well and those kind of ideas. And so for you to look at someone who's just angry, lashing out to strangers, that kind of thing, and to say like, well, maybe I'm curious if there's something more going on beneath the surface. That's Christ-like in the way that Jesus did that as well. And it's a Christ-like feature that we don't talk or think about a lot, right? That's right.
Yeah. That's right. And we need to more as men, as we talk about building great men who build great men as God defines greatness. Greatness is seen in the self-control aspect where we actually do care about other men and their behavior, because a woman is not going to be able to do what you did, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. It takes a man who is trained as a warrior to do that, has the gun under control. If you carry a gun, you better learn self-control and all that kind of stuff. All right, now having on the other side of that and piggybacking on all of this conversation, what I want to say is I appreciate that you said to him, hey, you just cut loose in front of my daughter. And that's inappropriate. You didn't say it quite that way, but I do believe that we have a right as men to say, don't ever do that again. Mm-hmm. You cut loose on me in front of my daughter, and what you said stepped out of bounds socially. And I expect that you don't do that. And I think we ought to be the governor of other men. I've done that several times with guys who were talking to me, and I said, wait, I'm your pastor. You need to take that tone out of your voice. Right. Back it down. I'm your brother in Christ. Yeah. And I think that Christian men should do that.
an experience that had a big impact on me when I was in college is I was sitting on the beach with my friend and his wife, and we were watching the sunset. And, the details aren't important, but I said something that made fun of his wife in kind of a subtle, small way. And you need to know this about my friend, is he's a pacifist. So he doesn't believe that you should use physical violence in any capacity. And he heard me make fun of his wife. He looked at me and he slapped me in the face.
Whoa!
Reaction time.
Wow.
And my reaction to that was, it got the message across so clearly that I was in the wrong. And I didn't try to defend myself. There was nothing to defend. I shouldn't have done what I did. And his response always stuck with me. The fact that he was ready to defend his wife like that, I thought was very cool.
Heck yeah, you learned something you can learn in no other way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Those hard lessons.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I will also share that, had that same scenario happened 5, 6, 7 years ago, right as I got out of the Navy, probably would have been a different response. Also, to date, I've talked to at least 7,000 veterans.
Wow.
And helping them in one way or another. A lot of them have mental health issues. So what you were speaking about earlier really kind of made me think, I'm like, oh yeah, I see that in myself because I've seen that in other people.
Yeah.
And what I wish somebody would have told me was, everything's going to be okay. You don't have to worry about it. It doesn't matter. Just calm down.
And the calming voice of a man to another man is powerful. And we need to use our manhood biblically, spiritually, and powerfully.
Yeah, and now I get to have another day with my daughter, my son, and my wife, because I was, in my mind, I'm capable, I'm confident, everything is going to be okay. So now I can have those really difficult conversations that are necessary.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, let's go back to if you go home after somebody disrespects you in front of your daughter, are you steaming a little bit for the rest of the day, maybe the rest of the week? Is it kind of hard to calm down? Is it hard to kind of let loose and let go of that? I would imagine yes. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I teach jiu-jitsu Monday and Wednesdays, and the more I do jiu-jitsu, the more I teach it, the more I realize I never want to use it because it's a fight ender. Like, I can hurt somebody really bad. I'm fairly confident I can protect myself against anyone. Now, with that said, I don't ever want to use it, and I constantly tell people that I train, it's like, if you allow another person to let their noises affect you emotionally, you have no control over yourself. So circling back to what we were talking about before. When you speak to me, it's just noise, right? If I give that noise weight and allow it to affect me emotionally, I'm giving you a ton of power over me that I don't generally want to do.
That's right.
That takes a ton of self-control, a ton of confidence, a ton of capability to understand that. So I kind of throw these like silly scenarios where, you're in a bar and this guy is in front of you and he's, trying to grab your girlfriend and he's doing all these things and he's saying things to you. Just replace all the negative things he's saying with spaghetti, bananas, right? Like just nonsense words. Because if you do that, you'll start realizing, oh, it's just a hurting guy, right? Like, you can remove yourself from every scenario, but you can also escalate it and maybe not have the same outcome.
Wow.
Right? Wow. Especially for young men. Young men these days, I think, need to hear that message and take it to heart. And young men, like, I'm still a young man.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
I just turned 40, but in most cases, if you ask my wife, she tells you I'm 12 years old. But I'm trying to mature a little more. But yeah, it takes a lot to be able to realize that and not give other people the weight of, you're going to control my emotions. And my wife, right, she is, like I said, going back to the beginning, she is a large reason I am the way that I am, because she has shown me, demonstrated time and time again that, she's there to be with me and for me, and she's going to pull the best out of me. I haven't always stepped up to the occasion right away, but eventually I think I'm there right now, and I'm going to continue on that path for sure.
Wow. Wow.
Well, Anthony, we're going to close it out, but I want to thank you for coming on the show again. It's great to have you.
Thank you all.
I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of the Forge Truth Podcast. If you have any questions or comments on what we talked about today, you can email us at forge@forgetruth.com. And if you want to find out about the Forge movement, you can check out our website at forgetruth.com. Jason, why don't you lay down a challenge for our men today?
Well, guys, Anthony mentioned this again about his wife, so I want to advise you first and foremost, you need to marry up, and that way she will pull you up.
Yep.
But in all seriousness, I think as guys, we need to seek the Lord, and that way we can be ready in the areas of our physicality, of our spiritual lives, and emotionally. So be sure that you're seeking the Lord and that you're asking him to help you to be a whole man in all of these areas.